always been somebody who has been passionate about community, has been passionate about bringing people together, has been passionate about helping people live their most empowered life. And now as a mother, really seeing that mothers need that on such a deep level.
Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jenny@jennyb.co. Let's get started. It's my birthday. If you're listening to this on the day that it releases, and if you're not, well, get it together. Papa Rick is back in the game this week, all hands on deck to welcome our inspirational guest, Shira Danielle. Shira is a life coach, community organizer, yoga teacher, chef, healer, and event planner. Her work focuses on the intersections of spirituality, social justice, creative expression, and earth medicine. She is the creator of Mama's Wisdom. A mama of 2 beautiful beings, she is on a mission to help other mothers feel empowered, nourished, and supported. She believes that mothers have a wealth of wisdom waiting to be unleashed into the world. And by building up mothers' confidence, wellness, and financial stability, we give mothers more opportunities to not only survive, but to thrive. When mothers thrive, so will the children. With the children thriving, so will our collective future. Awesome. All right. Well, welcome, Shira, to the Relational Parenting Podcast. We are so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here and spending time with us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Shira, I would love for you to just kind of let our audience of parents know who you are and what you do and kind of how you got to doing what you do now. What led you here?
Yes, thank you. That's a beautiful question to start with. So as Jenny said, my name is Shira, and I am the creator of Mama's Wisdom, which is a community and hub for mothers and families to return back to living life in a ceremonial and sacred way. And we do that through our group coaching programs. We do that through our mother's blessings and family blessings, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more in detail later. And we do that through just giving specifically mothers opportunities to see themselves and live a more empowered life, and a life in which they feel supported and feel which they can truly thrive. And how I got here, it's been such a journey. I was just reflecting today in my journal about what is my superpower? And I wrote down that my superpower is in connecting and community building. So I have always been a glue, a bridge for things. Ever since I was in high school, I was student body president my junior and senior year of high school. In college, I was lead of the programming board, as well as the Buddhist meditation club. So to kind of rewind, I've always been a community builder. I've always been somebody who was a bridge and a connector. Now I was connecting between the worlds of spirituality and social justice. And I've always been somebody who loves to facilitate and loves to speak, from student government. That was like speaking on stage, giving, speeches and motivations. And then in college, that kind of transitioned to leading the meditation club. And And then after college, teaching yoga, and then understanding more about how to create sacred spaces and learning from different indigenous communities about what the sacred is, what it is to be sacred, what it is to connect with the sacred, what it is to be alive. And I studied with indigenous communities in North Dakota, and also the Winnemem-Wintu tribe up in the Mount Shasta area as well. So really learning by experiencing through these different indigenous communities about how to live a different way, how to live in a good way, how to walk humbly, how to walk in connection with the earth, how to walk in connection with fire, with water, with air, and with our spirit. And that really deeply influenced me as well. And so really from that period of time, I started then to create my own sacred spaces with different members in my community to hold space for people to just live more empowered lives. And then I went through the most powerful ceremony of my life, which is giving birth to my first child, Rhythm. And that was back in 2020. And from there, my purpose started shifting. I started to really delve into this new role of mine, which was mother, and that became all-encompassing. And I stepped away from facilitating and from leading, and more so was like, okay, how do I become a leader in my own home, in my own life? But also, how do I give myself time to just integrate and understand who I am? Because now I've adopted this huge role of mother, and I'm curious about who I am in this place. And then I had my second daughter, Madrona, in 2021, so shortly after. And after I had Madrona, I really had to step back and be like, okay, I know I have a big purpose here, and I know what I love to do, which is to support others and to be of service and to create these sacred experiences. But how does that want to be channeled through me? And I really took the time, about a year, to sit with the medicine of being a mom and being a mom of two young baby girls. And then it just all started coming to me, these ideas about what mothers needed and how I could offer them that to them, and how I could also embody that experience for them. Because we can talk a lot of talk, and I can say a lot of things. Yes, I can say a lot of things to other people about how they should live or what advice I have. But the real medicine is going to be in how do I live it, so people can be inspired from that place. And that really actually clicked for me the other day. I got a text from one of my clients, and she was saying, and I was reading it to my husband, and she was saying, I was so tired last night, but I stayed up and I did the dishes after I put the baby down, and took some time to take a shower and wash my hair, and then I got a good night's sleep, and I woke up in the morning and I was so happy the kitchen was clean, and I was so happy that I took that time for myself, even though I was so tired and just wanted to go right to bed, because the next day everything seemed to be much more fluid and easier for me to navigate, and I feel so much better today. And it was funny because I was reading this text to my husband, and he was like, that's exactly what you do. Like, you stay up to take care of the house before putting the girls to bed, and you take that time for yourself even when you are tired, so that the next day becomes easier. And I show that a lot on my Instagram and things because I want people to have a visual in addition to my words, to really know this is how I live and why I live this way, and you have the opportunities to do the same. It's just shifting certain things in your perception of how you see yourself and your routines and your family. So yeah, long story short, that's kind of how I came to my work. There's a lot of other little things that happened in between that time, but I would say the bridge is that I've always been somebody who has been passionate about community, has been passionate about bringing people together, has been passionate about helping people live their most empowered life. And now as a mother, really seeing that mothers need that on such a deep level. We need that kind of support. We need to have other mothers that we can reflect with and connect with. We need a space in which we can just be fully let go, not have to perform, not have to be super mom, not have to wear all the roles and the hats, but also a space in which we know that we are super and we can do all of these things and more. And how do we do that from a place of filling our own cup so that kind of overflows into everything else that we do? So yeah, I mean, I feel like right now, I do the work that I do mostly for myself because another question I was journaling about today was, what makes you feel powerful? And I feel powerful when I'm doing the work that I do with the mothers that I do it and with the families. I work with mothers. I also sometimes work with couples. I'm doing a ceremony for a bachelorette party in a couple of weeks where we're kind of taking what is normally, and it's a cool shift that I'm working with. I've been working with bachelorette parties and baby showers to not just have it be this kind of just place where you're just frivolously celebrating, which is fine, but how do we also honor that these are huge transitions for these women and these families to go through? And really bring an intentionality to it so that these women can remember how much support and love that they have in these very pivotal times, so that when it does get difficult in both marriage and also in familial life, that they have that memory to come back to refuel them throughout time. And I think the reason, I can do this work is because I've gotten poured into in this way. I'm very grateful that I've had mentors and friends and loved ones who have created these types of ceremonies for me and experiences for me so that I can continue to share that with the rest of the world. So I feel that in many ways I was chosen to do this work, and I have a responsibility to, because I have experienced the world in this way, and it's fun and exciting to open that world up to other people too.
That's so cool. It sounds like you found a space. It is powerful to do normal day-to-day, keep the place going. The story you tell about I don't know if it's a routine or whatever, okay, let's get the dishes done and let's take care of ourselves a little bit before we go to bed. And how that shows up the next morning in, okay, things are normal. I don't know. That's such a powerful story, bringing and drawing. It's not about you. It's it's like you're drawing on your spiritual energy to get that done. You're doing things in service to people and then have that to draw on, instead of just, because it's so hard being a parent, especially moms, but it's so hard being a parent of any kind where it's so hectic and out of control and things coming at you. That ability to keep a little bit of peace on the little things, which aren't those that little, really. That's a great story. I enjoyed that.
I'm glad. Thank you. And
that pulls all kinds of things together.
Yeah, it's like each of those little things kind of adds up. And yeah, like you said, parenting in general just gets so overwhelming at times that it's like, how can you do those little things to shift your mental space, your physical space, to make things a little bit easier? I know for sure if I go to bed and there's a sink full of dishes, that tomorrow is going to be exponentially harder for me because there's so much that has to get done in the morning. But also balancing, I like to be able to have that kind of routine and focus, but also balancing a feminine energy with it to encourage moms to also have those days where they let the dishes pile up and let things get messy and allow themselves to step back. And it's really about the harmony of those two things and finding that balance of the days in which you're going to let things go and the days in which you're going to stay committed to follow through. and giving yourself permission to have both and be both and accept all of yourself. Because I think that's one of the hardest things that I've noticed with the mothers that I work with is accepting just the full capacity of who they are in both the beautiful moments and the hard moments, and to not judge themselves on those hard moments or hard days.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's one of the hardest parts is letting the dishes go and not judging yourself when you do. That's so, so many things that I want to pull out of your story, but I want to start with the community building, because I feel like that is such a huge part of what we've really lost, especially during and after the pandemic. But even before, even like with social media and things getting even like, more and more on the go all the time, and everyone's doing everything and everyone expects themselves to be productive constantly. We've become less and less about community and, in-person socialization and gathering. And so I love that you're doing this. And I also love how you talked about having the memory of it to look back on, because like when things are really hard, remembering those moments where you connected to people in your life who loved on you and cared for you and took care of you. And that helps you remember that you're not alone and that you have people to reach out to. And like you talked about mental illness, the mental illness of people who are trying to change the world, and getting so burnt out themselves. And I think a lot of people who go out trying to change the world, it's almost because they have the mental illness or the depression or the whatever, like we can feel that society is falling apart. And that's why we feel so motivated to change things. I almost feel like, Shira, that you are, now that your population that you have come to work with as mothers, I feel like you are a healer of healers is where I was headed. I feel like you are a holder of people who are usually the ones holding space for children, for spouses, for households, for making things run and keeping the wheels greased. And there is such a huge need for that. There's a huge need for everyone to have more community and more support and more gathering and more joy and relaxation time, and ritual. And ritual is another piece that I wanted to pull out of that, is that we've lost so much ritual that we used to have as human beings. And we brush it off as like not important. We don't need to make a big deal out of these things or this thing or that. And the transition into marriage, into parenthood, into like these big life transitions used to be, and there are some things in some cultures and some holidays and some, that celebrate certain rites of passage. But so often I feel like motherhood is just expected. Like that's just what you do. Like we've lost the awe and the power that it takes to actually bring a soul across the veil into the physical world. It's like, I'm a fucking portal to the other side, man. And also like laboring for 25 hours and the pain that women endure, and like it's pain that a non-birthing person will never experience. You'll never know that power. You'll never know what it took. You'll never know the internal strength as well as the external strength that it took to achieve something like that. And then to immediately be dependent upon to keep something alive, to keep that thing alive and thriving. just so many different pieces. I was really excited when I talked to you back in March because I had my first ceremony. That was it was like a women's circle, prior to getting married. And, I did a bachelorette party, but then I had one of my bridesmaids wasn't able to go, because she was postpartum, and she offered instead, I don't know if instead is the right word, but she wanted to provide a, despacho ceremony. And so she and a couple of my other bridesmaids came, and they made these, it was candles and flowers and flower petals and finger foods. And, she brought me this gorgeous, rainbow hand dyed from South America, I think it was Guatemala, wrap that could be used for anything, but eventually it could be used to carry a child.
For a child. Cool.
And just all these beautiful, like, yummy things. And they did this ceremony where each of them, told me what strengths about me and, were inspiring to them. And, at the very end, they drew me a bath, like this gorgeous, petals floating on water and floating candles and, salts and oils, and just like, I felt like a queen. And
cool.
Like that is a memory that it carried me across the threshold of committing my heart and soul to this other human being. And I got advice from that ritual. I gained perspective on their marriages and what I was stepping into. And, so many pieces that I carry with me still and will carry for the rest of my life as kind of an anchor for when things get hard or things get confusing. And I know that each of those women at the drop of a hat, I can reach out to and be like, look, this is what I'm struggling with. And they will have a listening ear and a loving response and probably some really good advice. And I think mothers.
Yeah, there's something very rooting about that kind of thing.
Yes.
You could go back to it and hearken back to it, and a passage or a rite. Absolutely, that's a tremendous gift.
I'm so glad that you got to experience that. That's very similar to the types of ceremonies that we hold for Mother's Blessings and other rites of passage. And I think that, I think it totally changes somebody's life when they get poured into in that way. It's, you were saying that, people don't even like, what I've noticed with mothers and women in general is that they don't want to be the center of the attention. They don't want to take up space, and they're so afraid to do that. And then it's like they had this opportunity to step in and receive. And that's the key, especially for women and especially for mothers.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. A lot shifted for me when I understood that feminine energy, we think feminine energy, the root of it is being a giver. Because a lot of feminine energy in our societies is all about giving. We're nurturers, we're givers. The real root of feminine energy is receptivity, because you can only really truly give from a place of how much you can receive. And so in these ceremonies, it's an opportunity for who's ever being blessed or who is ever being, initiated to step back and just receive, right? Just receive all that yummy, nourishing, delicious food. Receive the beautiful, intentional gifts. And most of all, receive those words of wisdom and words of affirmation. In every ceremony that I've done for somebody, the most empowering part, they say, is when we have that circle and each person in their life says a memory, affirmation, wisdom to them. because we go by in our life so many times and we don't pause enough to tell the people in our life how much they mean to us and how much of an impact they have had on our lives, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, we have to shut out all that noise. Ceremony gives us the opportunity to shut everything else out and be radically present with ourselves and the people that we're with, and spirit, source, Allah, Hashem, whatever you want to call that bigger entity. And it really stops time so that we can drop in. And I always tell, you know, all of my clients and friends and family that, like, everything we do in life, all the hours we work in our job, the dishes, the running around, the grocery shopping, all those things are so that we can have moments like this. Yes. Because there was a time when this was just the way of life and the way that we were living with one another.
Yeah.
And so when you have kids, you have the opportunity to realize that you're constantly in a form of ceremony, because they're radically present all the time.
Yeah.
And and my work a lot of the times is, how do I help moms to drop in so that they're not overwhelmed with all that outside noise and can drop into the ceremony with their child, to look at their child in the eye and really receive that wisdom that's coming from their eyes, that's coming from the way that they see the world, that's coming from the way that they speak about the world, that they smell things, that they touch things, right? Children are such sensory beings.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of times you could joke and say, like, you know, children, it's like they're always tripping on mushrooms or something, but they're in their own ceremony, right?
Very wise, yeah.
And so... And they say that connection stays with children till they're about 7 years old, and then they start to acclimate to the world and start to lose that connection. And it's interesting because I feel like then the rest of our lives, we're always
right.
You know, wanting to be an adult so badly.
Yeah.
And I was like, kids are always wanting to be adults, and adults are always wanting to try and harness that inner child.
Yes.
So as mothers, as parents, we have that opportunity to really relive our own childhood experience through that connection with our child. And ceremony, ritual, connection, remembering how sacred our children are, how sacred this experience of motherhood is, parenthood is, really helps in that process. But it can be very overwhelming because there's a lot that also comes in this modern capitalist world that takes us and pulls us away from all of that, very intentionally so. So yeah, but I'm just so glad you got to experience that, and that you have friends and loved ones who were able to provide that for you. And I think that's the real gift. It's like, once you've experienced it, now you have an obligation for that next friend who gets married, for that next mother who is conceiving, or even for, I'm really excited having 2 daughters, for them to start menstruating and be able to have a rites of passage for them when they, get their period for the first time.
Where traditions come from.
Exactly.
Right. This was an impactful thing for me, and I'd like to provide that for the next person, Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's exciting because, also these rites of passage and ceremonies remind us the importance of celebration too. And, celebrating big moments in time, like becoming a parent, a mother, getting married, but also celebrating the everyday. That's something that I really encourage in my clients, is every day to find something that you're celebrating about yourself.
Yeah.
Because you have done so much probably in your day that just feels like normal, or feels like, oh, no big deal, but this is huge. Like even getting up in the morning is huge. It's amazing, and something that we take advantage of. Yeah. And then also something that I encourage in families and in my clients who are married or in partnership is to end each day, if you can, with your partner in acknowledgement, or some moment where you're like, I'm acknowledging you for X, Y, and Z. And again, it could be something small, like I'm acknowledging you for making dinner tonight. It was so delicious. Or something bigger, I'm acknowledging you for really committing to yourself. I see how much your patience has developed, and I know you were really working on that. Because once again, I think so much of us are just looking for that affirmation from other people in our life to say, hey, you're doing a great job, keep going. Yes. And that can be really hard as a parent and as a mother, because sometimes you don't feel like you're doing a good job. Your kid's constantly having a tantrum, or the laundry's always piling up, or you never get time for yourself. You never make that time. Yeah. And so parenting can, sometimes you can have those blinders on where you're like, just got to get to the next thing, just got to stay focused. And then you take those off and you can really see the full picture of what's happening.
That's the great thing about what you were describing about kids is, the new mind thing. The sign over my head is Shoshin, is new mind, I think. And
beginner's mind.
Kids, beginner's mind. And everything's new to them. They don't, so they draw attention. The value is they go, oh, look, a butterfly or whatever. And what you're just describing there is bringing our attention back to the now. We get filters. I lived next to train tracks for a few years and got to the point where I didn't notice and it would just thunder and rattle the place, and got to the place after a very short time where you didn't notice the trains go by. And then you'd be sitting there, I'd have a friend over, and we'd be sitting and talking, and they're like, how do you live with this? It's what? Oh, yeah. The train went by. That's growing up. We learned to filter things out to a tremendous degree. We got long-term goals, right? And stopping ourselves, having a ritual or a daily of an affirmation, bringing it back to real and say, this was a good day, and maybe gratitude and an affirmation for somebody else. Thanks for what you did today. And get rid of the blinders, a little bit, and get here and now. Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, another practice I really like that I learned from Abraham Hicks was, at the end of the day, writing a list of all the things I liked and enjoyed about this day. I was doing that for a long time, and that was really nice. Kind of like a gratitude list, but looking back at my journals, I was like, oh yeah, it's like, it made me look more at like the finer details of things. Like, oh, I really liked that conversation I had with this person, or I really liked the way that person held the door for me, or the way that the wind blew that time,
I like that. Almost makes it easier to make the gratitude list. When you said that, my brain just went, oh, that sounds so much easier than finding things I'm grateful for. Like, because it's always, right, 3 things you're grateful for every day. Like, that's the thing to do. And yes, that's a wonderful practice, and it can be really powerful, especially if you're like really struggling or something. But the simplicity of things I liked or enjoyed feels very different to me than gratitude. And even though the things I liked and enjoyed, I am grateful for, it's easier in my brain to write 25 things I liked and enjoyed versus 25 things I'm grateful for. I don't know why, it just feels more complicated and
less lofty or something.
Yeah, something. Somehow. But the kids. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it takes those just those perspective shifts sometimes to really make something more accessible for ourselves and others. And I really love that. I did want to speak to one thing, if I can, before
absolutely
moving forward. So I did mention something about celebration, and I want to honor that. I also want to honor that these ceremonies, a huge part of these ceremonies and opportunities for people, and the work that I do is around grief as well, and the union between celebration and grieving, the union between birthing this next iteration of yourself, whether it's as a mother, as a wife, as a newly menstruating individual, whatever it is, and then also the death process that happens as well. and to create sacred spaces, not just for people to celebrate, but also for people to feel safe enough to feel some of those heavier and heavier emotions and experiences, and to be able to do so in community, I think is so important, because so many of us grieve and are in sorrow alone. And I've gotten through, the death of loved ones through communal grieving ceremonies and support. And I think that's so necessary, especially for mothers, because of the transformation that happens when they go from being a maiden to a mother, or even going from being a mother of one child to being a mother of two children. Yes. And really honoring that there is a rebirth experience that occurs, and that there will be very hard and heavy days ahead, and that you have this infinite amount of wisdom and strength that have come from generations of people who have done this before you, that are living in your blood, in your DNA, in your womb, that are here with you now to support you, and just bringing a sense of normalcy to the fact that grieving is just a part of the human experience, and that we are, that I think for mothers, it can be really hard, because you're like, I'm supposed to be happy. I just had this is what I wanted, or I just had this baby, and there's all these expectations for me to bounce back and to be happy and to be glowing and beautiful and all these things. And actually I just feel so much, and nowhere to be affirmed in feeling all those feelings. Or, I got a post on Instagram, this really cute picture of my kid, but really behind the scenes, I'm sobbing my eyes out. My nipples hurt because I've been breastfeeding all day, and I'm really insecure about the weight that I've gained through this experience. And it's like, wow, that's so much for you to hold, in addition to all the hormones that, all the shifts in your hormones. And I want you to know you're not alone in that. Many of us are feeling that way, or have felt that way. And that's okay. And if you do need advice, not getting unsolicited, but if you do need advice, here's my experience with this, and here's how I navigated through it. And that's why I also really believe in necessity, and something that I'm working to build with Mama's Wisdom. And my next coaching program is to create intergenerational spaces of learning for mothers and for families, because I think that's something that we're missing in our society, is that wisdom from the grandmothers, from the great grandmothers, of how they moved through times that were hard, and how to care for ourselves and for our loved ones. And that's not things you're going to read in books, right?
Their broader experience. They can share their broader experience, not only their personal experience, but their interactions through years and years with other people. It's very powerful when you're having a hard time, for somebody to go, and not to minimize it, but yes, that happens, and it's a real thing. It's not you being crazy, and I guess that's an affirmation of, yep, this is a hard time. What can I do to help?
I mean, even this podcast is an intergenerational space, right? You doing this with your father, that is an intergenerational experience. And I think that's really valuable, because you have your perspective of everything that's happening in your world, in your generation. And then your father has all of his wisdom from being on this planet longer, and the experiences that he's had that are unique to him. So overall, I just really advocate for most spaces, I think, should be intergenerational. We should have more spaces that are accessible to young children and elders to be sharing space together, right? A lot of experiences, like, at this age you go to a bar, at this age you go to a club, at this age you go to the playground, at this age you go to, I don't even know where elders go and hang out, So I think we do need more accessible places for there to just be more communal learning from different generations. Because just like we can learn from our children, there's so much wisdom that our elders can teach us too about. what it means to be a parent. And I also think it's important because I think there's conversations where we might not agree. I recently held a mother circle that was an intergenerational space, and we had some differing opinions about discipline and about, just raising children and what we feel is appropriate versus what, people of different generations felt were appropriate. And I think it's also really important to have conversations in spaces where people aren't agreeing about the ways that we're supposed to do things and how we learn from those disagreements as well.
Jenny has spoken before about grandma and grandpa having different ideas than mom and dad on what's going on, and it is important to keep in mind that, what I think is a good idea, it's a different world. It's been 30 or 40 years since I was raising kids, and the world changes. And so you got to keep an open mind. Things change.
Yes, absolutely. But, at the same time, it's like you did a phenomenal job with your daughter, obviously,
I like to think so.
And
it wasn't just me, I should add.
But I have to remember that sometimes too, because we live in an intergenerational space. We live with my parents right now. They're helping us out with our 2 daughters, and it can be definitely confrontational, right? I have very differing values sometimes than my own parents about these things, and then I have to step back sometime and remember, like, well, they also did raise me, and yes, things were not perfect, but I came out to be how I am, and there is a level of respect and honoring of their ways that I should have. And then also they raised me to be an independent and fiercely passionate radical thinker, so I'm going to also have a different way of doing things as well. So it's definitely that.
There's the learning, there's honoring your parents and respecting the way that they raised you and the values, and you carry some of that with you. And then on your own journey through adulthood prior to having children, you learn new and different and possibly better ways of doing things. And your children are different than you. And so there's different, I say this a lot. Yeah. And I've said it a lot lately in a lot of conversations that I've been having, is that it's not either or, it's both and. And that's where things like grief and conflict and all of those things that are generally seen as negative experiences, like normalizing those things and being like, these things are part of life. They're going to happen, and we need to stop sweeping them under the rug or trying to avoid them all of the time, and just face them head on and learn the skills necessary to navigate them. And that is something through these communities that you've created. Not only are you holding space for women and transition and all of those things, and creating community and creating relationship, but you are also normalizing the darker pieces and being like, life isn't just this or that. It's both. And it's, you have a baby and it's a miracle and it's beautiful. And you're being ushered into this new space and new version of yourself. You're being upgraded. You have all this wisdom and knowledge and strength, and you're grieving a part of yourself that is no longer. That chapter has ended. And how can we hold all of those things in the same space together? And how can we hold it together in relationship, in community? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. That's the real value. Those words like community and village and, pack of wolves or whatever it is, we're stronger as groups. Where you have access. I think what that really is access to broader experience. If someone's having a problem and there's 100 people looking at it instead of 1 or 2, odds are you're going to get through that a little better, or at least have options. You've got the support. It's very important. And I guess in my mind that always was an intergenerational thing. It's not a bunch of 22-year-old mothers, it's grandmas and with kids running around, and it's always got multiple generations.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the one other thing that I wanted to, well, I've lost it. So actually go ahead, Dad.
Oh,
There's
I'm
so
sorry,
many.
sweetie.
I know. No, it's not your fault. I lost it.
I know. We're gonna book you for about 4 more sessions here.
Right.
I'm here for it. This is another thing that makes me feel powerful. So I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned. Well, now I've lost my train of thought. You mentioned what were you talking about again? Did I actually write it down? This is how Jenny and I work. We're both a little ADD.
I love that. I love this because it's funny because I'm like, oh, this is why this is the necessity of editing, but it also makes it more relaxed because we don't have to be like, always.
It's not scripted. Yeah, it's not like we're all reading the same bullet points or anything going down. Oh, shoot. It was an interesting point to me anyway. Tribalism. It'll come back I'll text it to you if it doesn't come back till tomorrow.
Right.
Okay.
I started to talk about this, but I want to touch on it again. Something that you and I talked about, Shira, when we chatted on the phone was not just the ushering of a new baby. And you said that there's a birth of a child. There's also a birth of a mother in the first child. And then there's in the second child and beyond, there's a birth of a mother of 2, a birth of a mother of 3. Like those women are all different people. And
definitely,
as you birth that new part of yourself, there's also a releasing, a letting go of, and potentially a grieving of who you were prior to that, who you were as the mother, who you were as the maiden who could devote herself to her spouse or partner, who could go do anything on a whim, exercise, endless energy, whatever, the body that you had and all of these different things. And there's a releasing of that as you step into motherhood. Like your body is going to change. Your hormones are going to change. There's a whole journey in the perinatal space. And then afterwards where you've graduated into, full motherhood. And there's a shift in your either your relationship with your co-parent. Marriages and partnerships change and evolve when a child is born, and there might be a grieving of what your relationship was before the baby came and what it looks like now. And there's just something so multifaceted and powerful in that it's not just now I'm a mom and I've lost everything else beforehand. Or now I weigh, 20 pounds more and have, a postpartum belly. And everyone's always trying to get back to that, get my body back, get my relationship back, get my freedom back, get all of these things back. And it's like, whoa, let's stop fighting this war against yourself. How are we ushering people across these major transitions and thresholds? Like there's very little honoring of that anymore. And the wisdom that comes through, like you said, from the older generations to let the new generation, the new transitioner know, like, this is what it's going to feel like. This might be what it looks like. Might be the feelings that come up. This might be the grief that you're holding, and you're not alone and you're not crazy. And like, this is how it's supposed, this is normal. This is how it's supposed to be.
This is not wrong. Yeah, this is just different.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, something that I like to tell my clients and friends who have just become mothers is, it's not about bouncing back. It is about flying forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in order to fly, it's kind of like a bow and arrow. Like you're kind of being pulled back in order to fly forward.
Yes.
or it can feel that way sometimes. And just, I mean, I think we touched upon this, and then Papa Rick brought it up briefly about the imaginal cells, and this idea of flying forward came to me through the process of a butterfly, and how a butterfly is created. Right? It's first a caterpillar, and it's like in its caterpillar phase, and it's like eating everything in sight, which like postpartum, at least for me, I was just like eating everything. And that is such an important part of actually the postpartum experience, is for the mother or the birthing person to be eating really nutrient dense food for themselves. And if they are choosing to breastfeed, for their baby as well. You're eating and eating and eating and eating and eating. Mm-hmm. And then next, the caterpillar starts to go in its cocoon, which I kind of envision the mother like in her bed, in all her blankets, probably unable to really walk or move since you just gave birth. Kind of in that phase. For me, it was a lot of tears because my hormones were all over the place, because everything was so new, because when I had a second child, my first one was going through toddlerhood, and it was so overwhelming, and everything just feels like this dark place and overwhelming sensation. And at the same time, when the caterpillar goes through that, there's this experience of something that's called the imaginal cells. And I haven't looked at it in a while. It's something that I always have to kind of refresh my memory on. But I believe the imaginal cells, what happens is, in order for the caterpillar to transform into the butterfly, these like new cells are created that are imagining something different from what it was before. And at first, I think the caterpillar starts to attack these cells because it's like a foreign entity. And then the imaginal cells kind of take over, and that helps the process of the caterpillar transform into the butterfly. And I really think if we think about motherhood in that way of like, you're going to go into the cocoon, you're going to go into the darkness, but darkness, I don't like to think about light and dark as opposites of each other. I like to think about light and heavy as opposites of each other. But I think darkness is a beautiful thing. And darkness is like the womb, and darkness is like a cocoon. And, and
the Zen thing. Without darkness, there can't be the light, right?
Exactly. And that we shouldn't be running away from darkness, right? Beautiful things happen in the dark. And to delve into that experience of our dark night of the soul, right? That's an expression a lot of folks use about this experience of rebirth. So to go back into that womb space, and in that womb space, in those harder moments, finding those glimmers of hope, those imaginal cells, imagining what you want to be different in yourself, in your life, not what it was before. You're not going to go back to being a caterpillar. Mm-hmm. And as a caterpillar, you didn't even know how good it could be as a butterfly.
Yeah.
But in the process, in between, you have this opportunity to imagine where you could possibly go and be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so in the spaces that I create for moms, we do a lot of that imaginal work, a lot of that envisioning. But first, we do a lot of the releasing to create the space to even be able to see, and not see with our eyes, but tap into that deeper wisdom of our soul and what the universe is calling upon for us in this next iteration of ourselves. And I can say that I am the strongest I've ever been, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the most well-nourished, the most grounded, and the most in love with myself. And that, I think, that has been the gift of motherhood for me. And I think that should and could be the experience for every mother if they have the right support to be in their postpartum experience, right? Some mothers have to go back to work after 6 weeks. Where do you have time?
or
to
sooner.
grieve? Where do you have time to be in the right or sooner? You know, some mothers are completely alone. They have no partner. They have no family. They have nobody else lifting them up.
I've heard
nobody
moms
else to lean on.
Giving birth and going back to work the next day because they don't have anyone else paying the bills.
What a nightmare.
I'm like, how? How are you even walking? Like, how?
Yep.
Where is your baby?
So
like,
it's like,
what, like
most exactly.
It's
mostly
awful.
in the United States.
Exactly. Mostly in the United States.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of mining and slave labor that occurs elsewhere, but yeah.
Well, sure, yeah.
Yes, but
Good
a lot
point.
of it.
Good point. Yeah.
No, and the thing is that it's intentionally designed to fail mothers because the whole system, because once, you know, failing our mothers is the backbone of, you know, our whole society, right? It's like if we nourished the mother and supported the mother, then the mother could actually take care of the children, then the children could really be raised to live a full life, and then it trickles out into everything else. That's why I'm always about, you know, it's amazing a baby is born and how do we support this baby, but more so how do we support this mother so they can support their baby?
Yes.
Because the mother knows best what this baby needs.
Yes.
But we need to be able to make sure that the mother is okay so that the baby always gets what they need directly from the source of where they came from. And so, I think
I don't think it's so much anti-mom, right, as disregard. You know, it's just
letting a woman rest doesn't make anyone money. Letting a woman be a mother doesn't make anyone money is what happens.
That's the modern capitalist version of that, right? And that's probably true. You know, if I always like
There's
to
no
go back
space
5,000 years
for
ago,
being human inside of capitalism.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
and neglect. That's where we need activists to bring that stuff back.
And there is some beautiful organizations and people doing amazing work to do that on a systematic level, and also all the way down to just like the personal one-on-one. And we need all of that. We need the people who are just working with mothers and families like myself on that one-on-one level. And then we also need the people who are helping to make those systematic changes, because that is really, really necessary as well. Because there's just the way that the whole system's operating right now. It's not a way for families to thrive. And we want and need families to not just be scraping by to survive. Some families aren't even able to survive in this climate. But how do we create environments not just for survival, but for thrival, like to be able to thrive and fly, right? Like to be those butterflies.
That's a whole social commentary there.
Like I talk to so many parents, and I'm like, relational parenting, like gentle and kind and patience and all of those things. And these words are so foreign because we are not, the way that society is constructed is not conducive to parents, to mothers, fathers, and everything in between. No one is pouring into parents, like being a human being and reproducing. Like everyone just wants you know, to be a cog in their machine. And if you have to take time off to be a human being, I lose money. And part of this whole relational parenting, like the podcast and all the things that I'm trying to do and that you're trying to do, Shira, is pour into parents so that they can be present with their children, so that they can raise kids in a way that is human and intuitive and present and loving and kind. And like, because when society and jobs and expectations and productivity and we got to do the dishes, we got to cook, we got to do this, and there's no time to do any of it. We're just barely making rent. Like everything is in fast forward instead of like the present moment and actually enjoying and sinking into life and having the energy to celebrate the big transitions, etc. And something that you said earlier about the feminine energy of a lot like women and mothers and, wives, the archetype is that we are givers.
Yes.
And something that I have had to undo in my own relationship and inside of my own self is open up to being a receiver. Actually, the feminine is the portal, is the open cup, is the chalice. Like the woman is the receiver to be poured into so that we can create life.
Yes.
We literally create life when we are poured into. We create life. We create a home out of a house. We create a meal out of ingredients. We create and we keep the schedule going. We keep everyone organized. We keep everyone together and bonded and just like we are the creators.
Yes.
And if we are not well nourished emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, then we cannot create an abundant, thriving life, household, children. Like everyone suffers when the mother suffers. And as a society, we've just absolutely forgotten that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forget how it works. You can only go so far on your own energy, your own strength, if you don't have some means of tuning into other people, support of other people, a spiritual side that at least gets your, jazzes up your psychic side, your internal spirituality that enables you to feed others, right? Put on your own mask before you put your oxygen mask before you, work on your kids. We forget how important that is just to life, just to survival, and how much better it can be.
Yeah.
The world, the modern industrial world is about creating drones for factories and offices. It is not about us. It is about the industrial society. So what we're doing, collectively is a reaction to that. Okay, so we see a need, and so we try to correct it. And it would be nice if society would fix that for us, but I wouldn't hold your breath. I think we need to keep doing what we're doing, and eventually that'll turn into a grassroots thing, maybe, and things will change. But we need a lot of pressure on the powers on City Hall, to affect that. In the meantime, we're leaning on each other and building communities.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you were talking about being like women being these creators and these portals and how we create life, right? And something that I always love to pour into my mamas is that like the same energy that you created life with, you can create the life that you want with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
yes.
But we can't create that from a place of being depleted, which many of us are working from. So how do we fill our cups up so that we can tap into that creative energy, so that you can create also the dreams that you want to create? And it's just so wild. And I had this experience too of how we go through this powerful experience of birth, the most powerful thing that we're going to do, like, and that human beings do. Yeah. And then like almost instantly we forget how powerful we are. Almost instantly. It's like, oh, I just did this really powerful thing. Oh, and then like all the insecurities, like,
well, you're too busy.
It's like,
all right. Oh, we got to eat. We got to be warm.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we help mothers, women, people remember how powerful they are? Also, just being born in this world. Like, I also like to think about how the baby is extremely powerful as well to go through this really tight portal and come into this world. So like we all did that as well. And so we were all born, and, some people don't make it through that experience as well. Yeah. So there is a power in that. And like, just like you said, a passage. And just like you said, Papa Rick, about like, there's too many things that we get too busy right away. And it's like, that's why these ceremonies and why these moments in time of slowing down, just like that trip you just took, are so important. Yeah. The slowing down is essential because we're entrained
Yeah.
Entrained is like a new concept that I learned about recently. Entrainment was created by this Dutch physicist who was watching pendulums swing and realized that when you bring two pendulums close together, they swing at the same pace and in the same direction. And he noticed that also with like heart cells. If you bring two heart cells together, they start beating in the same way. And so we realize that every energy is being entrained.
Chaos theory and everything is entrained. Thank you very much.
Exactly. So what are we? Yeah. What are we entraining our energy to? What are we not consciously entraining our energy to? So it's like the world is chaotic. And so a lot of the time we fall into that entrainment of chaos. And how do we shift from being entrained to being the one who is in training, which I'm sure is a lot to do with relational parenting as well. Of like what I think about a lot of times with my toddlers now is like, okay, you all are having a tantrum right now, and I can start to have the tantrum too with you, start to be entrained to your energy with you. Or I can be the mountain in this situation. I can be the rock, the tree. And you can entrain to my energy right now.
That is everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So
be in charge of the energy in the room. Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's also with other parents, though. Like if your friend circle of parents are people who let the kids decide the energy in the room, or they succumb to the children's energy every time something big emotions happen, then you are that much more likely. It's not even that much more likely. You are 95% likely going to copy their behavior and the way that they raise their children. So if you are not surrounded by people who can be calm in the storm of their children's emotions and who you are talking to regularly and, chatting about parenting or venting or whatever, the people, the 5 people closest to you has been well studied. The 5 people you spend the most time with are the ones you're going to act like, just like in training, you will entrain each other. Accident. And so if
choose your friends well,
your 5 closest friends are parenting in an aggressive, shouting, meltdown kind of way with their kids, then you are 95% likely going to be that kind of parent too. And so, anyway, the entrainment, that's such a fascinating. They're starting to prove so many things in physics theory now that we've known spiritually for hundreds of thousands of years. And I'm just like, maybe they'll see now. Maybe they'll see now. Like we've known it for a long time. We can see
There are people who don't want to admit there is something bigger than themselves. This all flows from, a community to the individual or the universe into a spirituality. And there are people who are closed off. You were talking before about receptivity. Without receptivity, if you're closed off to whatever the source is, then you fail it is a spigot stuff, a coconut can fall and hit you in the head, it can impinge, but if you're not open to it, you don't really grow from it and recognize it. And, it's not of value to to your community. You haven't learned anything. So absolutely, there are those patterns and rhythms. I think that all gets back to rituals and rites, and it's good to have a community around you that remembers that you're going through something, and so it's time for this ritual. Just because I'm overwhelmed doesn't mean the other 100 people in the village are overwhelmed. And it's good to have the grandmas doing things and keeping some order. There's always some order in the universe.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that value part, I think, is very important. Very important. I've realized to the work that I do, like in many different ways. First, in just how we build healthy habits as a family is all going to be rooted from our values. So I always have my clients really reflect on first, what are your values? What is your value what are your values in your relationship with your partner? What are your family values? That's how you actually build your habits and your routines and check in with that. And then the other element of value is like having mothers, families, people understand the value in pouring into mothers and pouring into and creating these spaces for mothers, because that's where I've had to bridge is like with even getting clients is like first having the mothers understand that they are first valuable enough to take this time for themselves. And also that this work that we do together is valuable.
Yeah.
Because people will invest in what they think is valuable. That hit me the other day when I realized that people are paying $1,500 for nosebleed seats at a Taylor Swift concert. And I'm not judging those people. I just realized that's what they value. So they're going to pay that money. Imagine what
the first row costs. If I'm not, I'd be lucky to scrape the $1,500 together. Oh my God! Yeah, take what you can get.
So if people are so it's like, how do we get people to value the work that we're doing and how necessary it is, and then understand that it is worthy of investing in themselves and in their families because they are worth it. Yeah. And so value is so important too. There's so many gems that we've talked about. An advantage
of old people because they, hopefully they've gotten to a point where they can sit back and watch a little. They're not quite so busy chasing rugrats around, right? And they can sit back and see that, hey, there's a parent that could use a lesson or, we should hang out with. And see, monitor some of that larger picture stuff, maybe, hopefully.
Well, and mothers and fathers and all other identifying parent names value spending money. The parents that I have talked to will drop any amount of money to make their child's life better. They will send them to the right camp. They will send them to the right tutor, the right teacher, the right school, the right whatever to help their kid's life be better.
Yes.
But so many, if you ask a parent, what is their number one value? It's taking care of my kid, making sure my kid has a good life. And it's like, well, what if I told you that you being healthy and nourished and happy and like all of you, like you being put together, you having the services and supports and community that you need is the number one determining factor of how well your child's life goes. Number one.
Yeah. Don't be overwhelmed.
The quality of the quality of your presence in your child's life will determine their life quality forever. It will set the foundation for 18 plus years into adulthood. That is the number one determining factor of life satisfaction is the quality of your relationships. And it starts with the parent-child relationship at birth. But parents do not, it's not well known because it's not a part of our society. Everyone believes that if they get their kid the right education or the right this or the right that, and yes, those are also factors. Those are also valid goals and values and wonderful things and good intentions. But the number one thing that we overlook constantly is the way you show up for your child.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for you to show up for your child, you have to have the supports in the community and show up for yourself first.
Yes.
You kind of have to teach yourself. It's not taught formally in this society, COVID,
it's about to be.
We're disconnected. Well, so you have to go looking for it. In a small tribe, there's a matchmaker or whatever, there's these roles sitting living right next door to you, and you're all much more connected. And now we're getting disconnected. And so parents are kind of going through a time where they are, while in the midst of being overwhelmed, they're being asked to go seek and find this stuff and having to do it more for themselves. It's hard to believe we don't teach this. And if we're going to have formal education, it's hard to believe we don't teach this, making better families intentionally,
Yeah.
Well, maybe this will be, maybe Jennifer can start making this into a curriculum that is.
That's the community I'm trying to create. Is I've actually got the YMCA. Exactly. I'm starting to collaborate with the local YMCA because there's such a huge roadblock to parents being able to access this information in an educational setting, in a group setting, in a community setting, building a village locally, not just online, which is also incredibly valuable to have anyone anywhere in the world to reach out to. But I've decided that my focus needs to be local right now. And I'm going to start partnering with all the YMCAs all over Colorado. And I've already written out the flyers and everything, and start, because the YMCA can provide trusted, background checked, trained childcare that is free or like close to it. And there is no stress of finding a babysitter, paying a babysitter. There's no planning the date. I'm setting up parents' nights at the Y. All you have to do is show up, and it's low cost. Childcare is included. Just show up, drop your kids off. Like, I've removed every roadblock I possibly can for you. Like, let's get together.
Yes. I'm like, we need to fly Jennifer out here to Philly and all over. So hopefully, because that's incredible.
Any major city, where it's that much tougher for parents on average, that would be a good thing. Well, you'll have to have branch offices, franchises. That's where you go.
You start training other people.
Yeah, and have it. I mean, online. Yeah, everything. The expansion will happen, but I've decided I'm like, I need to quit. My value, one of my values, is community, in-person community, and power. There is so much power that happens when people gather, and that's the whisper of intuition that has been eating at me for the last 6 months that I'm finally tuned into. And but before I go down that rabbit hole, to close, I want to say one more thing that it's just important to me to acknowledge, especially with the social commentary occurring right now, especially through the LGBTQIA+ communities, gender identification, etc., that feminine energy, when we discuss on this show feminine and masculine energy, it is not identifying gender, sex, or anything like that. Feminine energy is not independent of being female, male, identifying as a woman or a man. Like, everyone holds both of these energies inside of themselves. Every person holds both masculine and feminine energy. And men are also people who identify as men, people who identify as fathers, are also in need of receptivity and accepting help and receiving love and support and being poured into just as much as women are. And the difference comes when a birthing person is in that portal, that 2-year portal of pregnancy and postpartum and transition. And I think that's what we're really focusing on in this episode, Shira, is that portal of the need for a birthing person to be poured into, especially around the perinatal space and time in their life. But anyway, there's so much commentary and there's so much backlash when spiritual speakers are discussing feminine energy and masculine energy, and we're talking about these energies in some kind of, I don't know, it's not in like a polarizing way, like feminine is, masculine is. And we're not defining gender with those things. These are energies that are alive in everyone, and everyone has both. And that's
trying to define things that are on a spectrum like that.
Exactly.
Is kind of fruitless.
Yes, and and I'm glad, and I need to work on being a little bit better about my language, and just I speak about mothers and to mothers because that is my experience right now.
Absolutely.
But it is definitely about birthing people, and mothers are not people who identify as mothers are not the only one who are going through these experiences and going through birth, and I have a lot to learn in terms of inclusivity in that way, and
oh, me too.
And
I'm still figuring it out.
And
and that's good. We have to speak so people can hear us. If there's a message we want to have, it's our job to learn how to speak it so that people, the message gets through that we want to get through.
Yeah, but I'm really glad you brought up that last point as well. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah. Is there anything we did not touch on, Shira, that is important to you in this conversation?
I don't think so. I feel like we touched on so many things.
I know.
Okay.
Every time I get people on here, I'm like, God, I want to be popular enough that someone will tune into a 4-hour episode. I don't want to have to cut these off at an hour. Let's see.
I thought of my question I forgot. Oh. Postpartum depression. How did they handle it 2,000 years ago? Were they smarter about it or were they crueler about it? More matter of fact, I wonder.
I think that postpartum depression wasn't even really a thing 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. It was the way things are.
Well,
or you think they didn't get hormones?
Yes and no. I think that part of what causes postpartum depression is the lack of support that we have in our society.
It's causal. Okay.
And I think that it's also due to the mothers being malnourished and not taken care of and not supported in this very difficult time. And I would think, it would be different for different cultures 2,000 years ago, but in certain cultures, there was just protocol, right? Women were just mothers, birthing people were just taken care of, and they were fed specific foods to help them in this period of time.
Placenta and stuff for males.
Exactly, and their bodies were wrapped in certain ways, and there was a whole different things. That's not to discount. So I think there's a difference between postpartum depression and then just the experience of grief and sadness and change that comes
Massive
with having birth. And I think that we can't change that change and all the emotions that come with that, but the postpartum depression and the suffering that is happening for birthing people, that I think is something that we can work to change, and that wasn't always a reality for birthing people.
Because people are they're going through it alone.
Weird or damaged
is the issue. People are,
and they're having very traumatic birthing experiences too.
Yes, trauma in birth is a huge. It's coming into the light now. It's been an issue for a long time, but it's finally gaining some light. But being alone. Women and birthing people are alone postpartum. That's where the depression comes from. Before, like you said, they were being taken care of by their elders, by the women and the grandparents and the aunties and, people who were there, specialists, doulas, etc., who were there to wrap their bodies and help them heal, to put salves on the right places at the right times, to literally feed them in bed while they nursed their new baby. You are producing milk. I saw a statistic the other day that was it takes 25% of your brain space as a new mother to produce your breast milk all day. 25% of your brain space, of your calories to produce breast milk. What? So you're already depleted. You're already bleeding. You're already in pain. You're already going through this change as a human being and your whole identity. And now you don't even have all of your brain working because you're just focused on I've got to feed this child and keep it alive. And it's just insane. And it is the difference in postpartum depression now and what existed back then is that it was probably pretty rare because women were not alone postpartum. And most women now are almost completely alone postpartum.
Yeah. Good observation. That makes sense.
That was a good question, though.
That was a good question. That was one of his questions prior to recording. He's like, I know what PPD is. He's like, postpartum depression, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, what's PPA? And I was like, anxiety. And he's like, oh, because so I just want to touch on that, and then we really have to end. But
Yeah.
the anxiety, like people are like, well, women have always been worried about keeping their babies alive. That's normal. Yes.
Well, yeah.
But not sitting alone with it. So again, those intrusive thoughts, those depressive hopelessness feelings and thoughts that spiral in your head all day because you're alone with this thing that you're trying to keep alive 24/7. You're sleep deprived, you're
and you
in
have
pain,
no idea how to do it the first time. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think also the constant consumption of technology and like these very high expectations that are placed upon birthing people and parents to parent in a specific way and to be all of these things. And if you're not, you're falling short and all the, and so on and so forth. And I just think that you're alone, and then the only thing that you have is your cell phone and all of on the news and the Instagram and the, all the things that you're consuming, right? And especially for birthing people, you're that portal. So you're so open in that period after you give birth, and the veil is still so thin that's why consumption is so important in that period of time. That's why what you eat is so important, because that's what's going in, but also what you're listening to, who you're surrounding yourself by, what you're consuming in terms of television, news, all of that, because that's going to contribute to how you're feeling. And the sensitivity is so high in that period of time because you literally are an open vessel between the worlds.
Mark my words, one of the first applications for artificial intelligence is an AI robot to care for newborn children to relieve the stress from new mothers.
No, it's to care for mothers. Women care. The mother cares for the newborn child. She doesn't need help with the baby. She needs help with her. She needs someone to cook and clean and do the laundry. That's also a huge misconception, is that people want to come over and help, and they want to come over and steal the baby so that the mom can do all these things for herself. And that's not what postpartum mothers need. They need someone to come over and do all the other things that need done while they bond with their baby and keep the baby alive.
Exactly.
Without having to worry about all these other things.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's so important. I always have my clients have those conversations with their loved ones, have a list on their door of like, these are the things we need you to do. These are the things that we need help with, and to have a time limit. Boundaries are extremely important for parenthood, for
everywhere,
for everything and everywhere. But I think a lot of birthing people's boundaries get walked over and, just taken advantage of.
You just put a list on the door. So when people visit, I need a grocery run. Here's my grocery list. That's a great idea.
Like the first thing is always like, wash your hands. You're coming to my space, wash your hands, take off your shoes. And then here's a pile of laundry that needs to be done. Here,
if you're coughing, go away.
Exactly. Exactly. Or like, we're sleeping right now. You can leave the food at the door, kind of thing. And I think also the thing is that we've been talking about with people feel bad about being burdens on other people. People feel bad about creating these boundaries so that they can be taken care of. And there's a big shift that has to happen there, because you're not a burden on other people by taking care of yourself. And you're, anyway, it's a whole other thing.
Necessary to the tribe. Yeah. You're a productive member of the tribe. Yay.
All right, friends. Well, Shira, tell everyone where they can find you, and then we'll have all of your links and everything in the show notes. But where can people find you?
Sure. So you can find me at Mamas MAMAS.wisdom, WISDOM on Instagram. And my website is themamaswisdom.com. And I have all my services, my blog, everything is up there. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We appreciate you. Oh, look, you pulled it up. Nice.
I do my research, baby.
Awesome.
That's a good picture of you. Did your husband take that picture?
A friend of ours took that picture. in the Pacific Northwest, where we were just talking about out in Seattle.
Beautiful shot of standing out in the ocean.
Thank you. Yes.
Awesome. All right. So go visit themamaswisdom.com. Give Shira a follow on Instagram and check the show notes for easy clickable links and more information. All right. We will see everybody next week. Bye.
Great to meet you.
Well, did you learn anything new? Or have you heard all of this before? Do you agree with us, disagree with us, have a question? We want to see you in our inbox or via the Patreon page in the show notes. Tap on either link to send us your feedback, share your own parenting story, or support our mission of providing a connected community for all parents. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you loved this episode, click on that little star and give us 5 of them so we can get visible to other parents who are looking for us. This is your weekly reminder. Parents, you already have everything you need inside of you. You are a strong, loving, capable parent. And here, you are never alone. I'll see you next week.